Welcome to MD Source, helping you become a more informed you when it comes to your health. With a mission to share the most accurate and up-to-date medical advice and tips for healthy living, MD Source has conversations with real doctors and medical professionals who are the experts on the topics you want to know about. Today, Dr. Alexis Hazen speaks on nutrition and dieting and what foods you should stay away from. And now, here's Dr. Rod Rohrich.
Today we're going to talk about nutrition and dieting, a very, very complicated topic and very broad. And I'm pleased to have Dr. Alexis Hazen with us, who's a board-certified plastic surgeon and who really, really understands, what it takes for proper nutrition and dieting, and also, as a plastic surgeon, but also as a great physician. So Alexis, welcome. So tell us about what's a normal nutrition that you guide your patients through in both reconstructive and cosmetic surgery that makes sense?
So I think it's really hard these days because there is so much information. There's so much new information. People are getting bombarded with coffee's bad, coffee's good. You should take this supplement. You need this IV infusion. You shouldn't eat this. You should eat this. Protein powder is good. You should fast. You should diet. And I think people are just overwhelmed. So I try to keep things really basic and normal and get people back on track. So the most important thing is to eat stuff that looks like food. So what is that? It means you want to eat fresh, local fruits and vegetables.
Minimally processed. So anything that's in a box that has a shelf life of a year, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time eating. I mean, that's great if you're going to the moon and you can't eat anything else. But if you live in a city where there are, farmers nearby and you can access actual food, that's clearly much better. You want a balance of colors. And I know that's so it means, you want to stay away from all food that looks white and bland. So, dark green leafy vegetables, orange colored foods, red colored bananas
foods.
bad?
No, bananas aren't bad. They're perfectly fine, and they're great for treating certain problems like low potassium, and if you have a stomach upset, they're easily digestible. They're really great. If you have muscle cramps, eat a banana, makes you feel much better. They're transportable. No, bananas are good.
So minimally processed food. What about dairy? What about dairy? People always talk about I have a dairy allergy, and I can't. So we have like 13 types of milk. What when you go to Whole Foods?
So again, this is confusing, right? So
I'm confused. Yeah.
So most people could probably do just fine with milk. Bottom line, we probably don't need it. And it's has some protein, some fat. But many people do develop a lactose intolerance, which means that they don't process milk very well. And they would know that because they would get bloated or have diarrhea after they have milk
And there's a lot of options.
Yeah, and if you do have that, you could have almond milk, you could have rice milk, you could have oat milk. But we don't really need to drink milk. There are other options.
So you shouldn't have to have milk, like after being a baby? I mean, after age?
You really don't need it. I mean, fortified milk contains calcium. So you do need calcium, you do need protein, and you do need some fat. But you can get that from other sources. So the American diet is sort of like fixated on certain things.
That's what we grow.
They
get wheat, dairy.
Right.
And, that's the other thing. So let's talk about, what about the gluten allergy? So we've talked about the lactose intolerance, which because we have a lot of dairy.
And if you do have those symptoms and you avoid those foods, you'll feel much better.
So lactose intolerance, you get bloating, sometimes you feel bad, diarrhea.
You may get a brain fog.
Yeah. So what about gluten allergies? It seems like everybody seems to have a gluten allergy today.
So having a true inability to tolerate gluten.
Tell us about what is
celiac disease is very rare.
Right.
And that symptoms would be severe diarrhea and severe bloating and cramping.
And there's a test that can be done by a doctor to see if you truly have that. It's not very common. But what is actually quite common is having a slight intolerance to gluten. And
where do glutens come from?
And glutens are mostly found connected to wheat. But
Right.
wheat is in a lot of different things. So things you wouldn't even think about.
Because that's what we grow in the United
That's right.
States.
So, and some people could tolerate a more unprocessed wheat, but a higher processed wheat and highly bleached,
Right.
white flour,
Refined.
a lot of people have a hard time digesting. So things like, think about Wonder Bread and what that looks like. Do you know?
Oh, yeah, I
yeah.
know. It's
So
the white bread.
It's white bread. If it has a lot of ingredients in it, a lot of chemicals. It's highly processed. So a lot of people actually don't tolerate that very
So
well.
avoid white bread, minimize dairies. So what about the other breads? What about wheat bread?
So, so in general, our bodies do much better with foods that are less processed. So, but some wheat bread can be processed, and this is where you just get so confused and
Right.
frustrated that you throw up your hands and you say, "Well, I can't eat anything then."
Right.
But foods that are freshly made. So, you get wheat flour and you make bread, you put in a couple ingredients, and that's probably fine, and most people
Right.
would
So
tolerate
minimally processed food,
Food in
minimally processed
general.
bread.
that. Yeah.
Okay. And then,
And then gluten is in lots of other things. So crackers, pasta, any kind of processed food. But now if you can't tolerate gluten, there are other options. The other options are brown rice, are oat
Right.
doesn't contain gluten.
there are now, and actually, since it's such a prevalent thing that you can actually, in most grocery stores, it actually says this is gluten free.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's
And even
good.
at restaurants, you can ask for gluten-free
Right.
pasta. And some of it tastes horrendous, and some of it tastes really good.
Right. That's right. No, I know. And so it's, you have lactose intolerance, you have gluten. You think that we've done this to ourselves with our
Yes,
diet in the
for
United
sure.
States?
I think I can't, but we've done it to ourselves, but I think our environment is so toxic that now people are just highly sensitive to things. You think about all of the pesticides that have been used on our foods and for years and years, and the GMOs and the...
So tell our audience what that is, because I'm going to
okay.
talk to you about, I'm only eating organic.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So
Besides a higher price to the food.
So we don't want to ingest toxins. So organic food is in theory treated a certain way, and certain types of pesticides are not used
Right, so it's
on organic food.
non-pesticides and probably
non-GMO.
and non-GMO. What is GMO? Why is
So it's genetically modified, which in and of itself is not bad. Seedless tomatoes are genetically modified. Seedless watermelon, that's not bad. But what is bad are the foods are generally modified to enable them to endure pesticides and be hardier, so
grow
they
faster
can
and
grow,
have a higher productivity? Yeah?
Right. But they in that process, they can tolerate the pesticides and still grow, whereas something that isn't GMO would die. So what does that mean? It means that then there are pesticides that are in the skins of those vegetables or on the outside of them, and that can be highly toxic. So I think we've exposed our bodies to tons of environmental toxins, and people are just much more sensitized. I mean, think about all the skin things that we see, all the autoimmune diseases. I don't think these were such problems 30, 40 years ago.
So we're eating more processed food, more dairy products, more pesticide-driven foods that actually increase, because that increases the productivity for the farmer, but yet it's probably not good for us. So
right.
So all those things, and it's like you said, you eat food with color that's farm grown, that actually is minimally processed, and
so back to your organic question though.
Yeah.
So in theory, using less pesticide and using natural products to grow is better. The problem is organic farming is not highly regulated, so people can claim that things are organic and it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it does. So that's where it becomes a little confusing. So honestly, knowing if you have the luxury of being able to buy from a local farm where you actually know who that is and what they put, that's the best.
Right, yeah,
most
including
of us don't,
beef and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Most of us don't have that luxury, but
right.
It's ideal.
Yeah, no, I haven't grown up on a ranch.
Right,
we did.
right.
We would.
That was the cow you were eating.
Right, and we know that didn't have any, antibiotics or was, fed with non-antibiotic feed, and but those, that's possible.
And
that's
not hormones. So,
not hormone driven, and all those things I think have actually altered our whole genome. It's made us have more allergies.
Yep.
So what about the other craze on supplements and IV infusion therapy?
Yeah.
And where do we stand with that? Why is that so popular, and do we really need it?
So I had a really interesting lecture from a woman who started a company that creates a diet plan and nutrition plan for people. And so everybody was asking about supplements because, that's what she does.
Right.
She said, if you eat a healthy, balanced diet and you do not have an underlying nutritional deficit because of an enzyme, you don't need it.
That's right. And there was a recent study that showed just that supplements, unless you had some specific
deficiency,
you don't need it.
Right. So, people do have anemia, and those people should probably take iron if they can't get enough iron from exogenous sources. Probably some people should be taking calcium, especially older women who have osteoporosis. But in general, you shouldn't need supplements. I personally like the idea of them. I think we all do. I want to take a pill and just be better.
Right. I do too.
But you got to do the work and eat the good food.
Right, you do.
And
I
not,
think, and that whole industry, the supplement cosmeceuticals, is so unregulated.
Totally unregulated. And they can make claims about things, and they're...
As long as they don't make drug-related claims of, anti-aging, but they can skirt it very...
They can skirt it and talk about youthfulness and things like
right.
that. So then you asked about infusions. So there really is no evidence that IV infusions are helpful. I think that people feel better taking them. And I think the reason is that we're all tired and dehydrated. Like right now, if you give me an IV infusion, I'd be so happy.
Same here.
Because I'm super dehydrated. And so I'd feel better, and you would too, and we'd be more alert. But it's not really about the medicine or the vitamin. It's just the fluid, But if you sat and drank a liter of fluid, you'd feel better too.
Right.
So it's a bit of a hoax. We talked about this in terms of oxygen.
Right.
And oxygen therapy, and that was a craze for a while. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, and we all breathe it every day, but I guess you can concentrate
hurt
it.
You.
So what about the other thing about paleo versus vegan? We hear so much about I only do paleo diet or I have a vegan, and that's a real problem sometimes for us, especially when we do surgery, especially the vegans, because we want protein. So how do you sort that out?
So I think, people's individual constitutions tolerate different things differently. So for some people, eating a paleo diet, which is heavy in meat, it's sort of the caveman diet.
Right.
So it's high protein. It's not necessarily low fat, and it's high vegetables, very, very low carb, almost no carb.
Yeah, it's kind of a modified Atkins, which was really Atkins.
So a lot of people tolerate that diet very, very well and can become very lean on that diet. And we probably do need more protein than we thought, and we definitely don't need as much carbohydrates as the American Medical Association had recommended. In terms of a vegan diet, I think that it in theory is a fantastic diet because it's plant-based, and that seems to be the least inflammatory of all the diets. I think the problem is what's your protein source, and how careful are you going to be about that in terms of where you're getting it.
And is animal protein superior to plant protein? Because some people and some scientists would say yes, some would say no. And I personally, as a surgeon,
meat eater,
and as a carnivore, but also for my patients, I see my vegan patients have more wound healing issues than my non-vegan patients. And so I actually try to have them, encourage them to at least partially
increase their
do some more animal protein during that healing period. What has been...
So I think the problem is to get a complete protein in a vegan diet. If you're not getting animal protein, it's very hard to get a complete protein. So you can be deficient in a couple of the amino acids. And most people are not sophisticated about that, and don't realize that just eating beans is not going to be a complete protein, and they're actually missing some amino acids. And so what does that translate to? It translates to building blocks for the body, which can translate to wound healing.
Right.
So I agree with you. For my patients, I tell them before surgery, whoever they are, it doesn't matter what their diet is. I say, they ask me what they need to do, and I say you need to eat enough protein.
Right. I agree. High protein, preferentially animal based, and minimize, and obviously minimize the carbohydrates. But in closing, we know that certain things do have good science and are healthy. Caffeine is one thing that actually
performance
is
enhancer, good for your brain.
Good for your brain, good for your heart, good for your liver. Actually minimize or prevents Alzheimer's. Sometimes that's what people have talked about.
Sleep does
too, I guess. And I don't believe in sleep a lot. But and that perhaps a small dose of aspirin, 82 milligrams in some studies, at least in males, the Harvard study has shown that it does minimize cardiovascular disease more so than in females. But beyond that, and of course teas are healthy, drinking warm water over cold water is perhaps much better for our bodies. And of course Americans don't like that.
Like everything with ice.
We like ice, and ice is probably not good for our bodies since our body is 98.6.
Right.
So what else, other common advice would you say in wrapping up that people should do besides just, eat real food and, that has color?
I think throughout the day, having, not starving yourself so that you have some small meals throughout the day so that your blood sugar doesn't drop. I think you'll feel better. And if you want to eat more normal sized portions, that's going to help you do that a lot. And I think the other thing is just, portion control.
Right.
And in terms of, we're all going to eat stuff that's not perfect for us. That's, we're going to do that. But when you go off the rails, try to keep it to a small portion and try to keep it to something that's actual real food rather than like highly, highly processed. Right.
So that's all great advice. And of course, yes, portion control. Probably not eating, try not to eat in late hours, a heavy meal, which is really not a good thing to do. And just, eating real food. I think that's all great advice. And I think, and of course, exercise with that is also something you should temper with the diet. But the diet is really kind of who and what we become. So it's kind of input equals output. And I think that's one of the major causes of obesity in America today is that our diet is not good, and yet we are now not exercising as much as we should. So Dr. Hazen, thank you again. There's a sage advice on nutrition and dieting, and this is Rod Roark from MD Source, having you become a more informed you.
From the team at MD Source, here's to good health and to helping you become a more informed you. For the latest and most up-to-date information on health topics, visit mdsource.com. Drop us a line, sign up for our newsletter, and connect with us at mdsource.com.